about on the opposite side? Like, what are the things that you are like, hey, this is what I do, and I have found success with this, and I'm going to go deep here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things that I've focused on the past 2 years, again, are, as I already said, the SEO, and then my newsletter. I just being consistent with my newsletter. And I said this earlier, but I used two people that you featured here. I have to give them shout outs.
Yeah, please.
Ali Gromer, she helped me create my welcome and what she calls her nurture sequence. So when somebody signs up, they get an email 3 days in a row that just kind of gives you an overview of Alexandra's Kitchen. And then they get an email every Wednesday for like 10 weeks. And
Uh-huh.
I want to like build that out. And it's been so nice to have that happening in the background. I know that for new people coming, they're getting an email from me like once a week, if not twice. And then Matt Mullen helped me create what he calls these quick start guides to help people, entice people to sign up for your newsletter. So for me, one was on yeast bread baking and one was on sourdough bread baking. And it really helped grow my email list.
Cool.
And he gives you like a framework that you can use again and again, which I basically used it this spring. I did a farm share newsletter. So for people who sign up for CSAs, I just did this thing, and I did it like in real time. I didn't have it ahead of time, but every
Yeah.
Tuesday people got a farm share newsletter. So being consistent, like really trying to show up and kind of I don't do it exactly on the same day, but I try like either like they'll get my Wednesday newsletter, and then I try to send a newsletter out either Saturday or Sunday morning. And I've
Hmm.
just found that being really consistent, like sticking to that, like really being like, this is something you have to do. It helps. When you don't send an email for a long time, I feel like you get a lot of unsubscribes as soon as you send an email, because people are like, where have you been? And
Hmm.
they're like, I don't need this. So yeah, I think email is really important. They do. I follow the guy from ConvertKit, Nathan Barry. I get his
Hmm.
newsletter, and he just posted something from, I forget the guy's name, but email is kind of the thing that's the most consistent. It's the thing you can control. You're not like at the whim of some algorithm change. If you post consistently, if you send consistently, if you get rid of the people who are not, I'm very good about dumping my cold subscribers, people who don't open up an email for whatever ConvertKit, says. I just, I just delete them. I don't, I think
Yeah.
I know you can like re-engage them, but I don't.
Sure.
Um,
Idea being, if somebody, is not opening, is not engaging, then you clean up your email list by removing them. Not only is it helpful because then you're not paying for these extra subscribers, but also your email address has a higher open rate. Like in
right,
general, it's a healthier list. It's just
right.
kind of like email list hygiene.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it does make a difference. I really find. And resend, like if I send out a newsletter and, gives you that option to resend to unopens, and every time I send a newsletter, a ton of people unsubscribe, and it's great. I've like
Hmm.
changed my mentality with that too. Like it's, you don't want the people, if they don't want to be there, there's no point in them being there. So
Yeah. Yeah, totally. One of the things that I love about some of these elements that you've talked about is, at this point where you said, hey, you know what, I want to start thinking about this maybe more intentionally. Is that a fair way to assess it? Where you're like, hey, I want to think strategically about this, or how can I grow it? That you started to think about a phrase that I've been thinking about a lot, which is who, not how. And so, okay, great. You want to improve SEO and be strategic about that. One way to do that would be thinking like, how do I do this? Like, and you're not a Google Analytics person, and that's not what you like to do. And so you could like bend your own like self to like fit in that box, or you could say, who's somebody that loves that, and how do you bring them in to partner with you? Maybe same thing with email. It's not figuring out how do I do this? What are the specific things I need to do? Going through a bunch of articles, whatever it might be. You're saying, who do I bring in to help with this? And it feels like those have unlocked some kind of cool things. What does the newsletter do for you? Like, what do you see as the return on that? Traffic, engagement? Are you working with sponsors?
yeah, I'm not working with sponsors. I do find that it always, whenever I send out a newsletter, I get a bump in traffic. So even if I look at the numbers of how many people clicked through to the site, it's it it's a much bigger jump for whatever reason. Maybe they click on 2 pages or something once they get there. But I always see a bump in traffic every time I send a newsletter. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really just that.
Yeah.
And for the purpose of staying consistent, there was a period when I guess also like there was a period I was doing the virtual classes during, the pandemic. And so
Sure.
letting people know about a virtual class, but now I'm not doing those right now. So it's really just getting people to the blog.
Yeah. Were those classes that you would charge for? And what was that? What was that like?
It was really fun. It was great. I loved it. It was more, I did charge them. It was all, I was donating all of the money basically so it wasn't like part of like I wasn't doing it for the
Yeah.
money. It was just to like kind of during the pandemic to
Cool.
engage people and have something to do. It just got to be like when the world opened up and
Yeah.
I just, all of my kids were in activities. It was like so stressful trying to figure out,
Yeah.
like, I'm like home trying to teach a class. I'm like, how are my kids going to get to sports? So
Yeah. Right. You can only do so much. What did you do that through? Was it through just like Zoom or?
It was through Air Subs. You had Tomas on. Yeah. He was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was great. I would like to do it again on like a more spontaneous basis. And then that's how I actually started. It was a very spontaneous thing. Then it became very consistent twice a month. And then the world opened up and I was totally overwhelmed.
Yep. That makes sense. And that's a great example of why it's beneficial to have an email list is because if you are doing something like that, one of the greatest ways to get people to sign up for it would be by sending them an email. They know who you are. They're familiar. They've had touch points. We've noticed the same thing as we've been launching Clarity, which is the newest kind of startup that we've been working on. It's like, it's an email list. Like that's what's been really helpful. Email us and podcast. Like that's what we use to kind of build off of. So anything that you've learned on the, in regards to like building an email list, knowing that it seems like kind of the focus is, if I'm able to pull them out, are like SEO optimizations, kind of best practices, proactive improvements for older content, and email list building and consistency as kind of two themes. Anything that you'd be able to pull out from your experience in building your email list that's been really helpful that you'd advise other people to do as well?
Well, one thing, I would say like a couple of things. So one thing I learned for like Matt Mullen, he was really funny. He was like, people don't read anymore. So
sure.
you have to be like, he would restructure, I would write something and then he would restructure it, like almost like a block, like almost like H2s, like kind of some bigger text to kind of break up the email or use bullet points. And it was very effective. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think on those like quick start guides where it's like this bread course, like that kind of writing is very effective. And then I would also say though, every so often I'll write like a really personal sort of like post where it looks almost just like a blog post, but without any pictures, just maybe one picture at the top. And people really actually respond. Like when you put your heart into something, like it really is amazing. People will write and respond in a heartfelt way. They appreciate it when it's not just, so I think it's a time and a place, it depending on what you're doing, but I think kind of making that distinction and then structuring your post to, what's going to
There's something about stylistic, writing and the type of writing it is. Like if you're trying to communicate dry information, I think there's something to be said about structuring it in a way to most easily communicate it, which includes H2s, bullet points, short paragraph. To your point, if you're telling a really personal story, people are going to be engaged in that in a way where they're maybe not looking to like, how do I get what I need as quickly as possible by breezing through this, but saying like, how do I engage with this story? It's almost like, I almost see a difference in like story versus like CTA information, like next steps, which I think I'd never really thought about that until you pointed that out. But I think it's a really powerful point that writing and media can look different depending on what you're trying to communicate.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's kind of nice about the newsletter format is that you don't have to worry about SEO. You can just write your your email newsletter how you want. And you're not worried if it's like, if you're getting the Yoast green light. I know you're not actually supposed to worry, think about that, but you're not worried about, you just write it how you would want to write it. And people, they're either reading on their phone or they're reading, in their inbox, and they don't care about SEO.
Yeah.
They want something nice to read. I
Uh-huh.
mean,
Uh-huh.
sometimes they just want the information.
Right.
But that is something I found that's nice about the newsletter. So I can kind of write something heartfelt maybe there, and then push people to the like SEO written blog post.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's not either or. And I think sometimes as creators, we think, oh, you either
Right.
have to just focus on SEO and optimize and figure out Pinterest and social media,
Right.
or you are, in the camp of personal stories, and that's
Right.
you're including that. And I think it's both. And like
Totally.
Lindsay does on Pinch of Yum, she'll occasionally do like a coffee, she calls them coffee date posts.
Yeah.
But it's
No, I love
essentially
those,
just
yeah.
like, it's like an update on like, here's what she's been up to or we've been up to. And for a small subset of people, it's like, I'm really interested to hear what you've been up to.
Yeah.
But it's not going to rank well. And it
Right.
also probably wouldn't be great to put a ton of that information in a recipe post, but you can
Right.
do both of those things. Like,
Yeah,
and I think it's important. Yeah. Point that you bring up, and a good reminder that it doesn't have to be a hard line, which is great.
Yeah.